Money didn't start in banks, and it didn't start with coins or cash or numbers on a screen either. Believe it or not, money started in temples. And that kind of raises a question that most of us probably don't want to hear the answer to. Who do you trust to store your wealth? Because the moment money stopped being personal, the moment it stopped being you owe me so and so, somebody had to take control. And let's face it, whoever controls the money has the power. So on today's history of money, we're going all the way back to when money and power became inseparable. So in the last episode, we talked about why the barter system failed. It couldn't scale. It couldn't specialize. It basically collapsed under its own complexity. So societies did something radical. They created money. But from the very moment that money popped into existence, new problems started to appear. Because money needed to be stored, standardized, protected, recorded. And you weren't just going to trust your neighbor with that, were you? So you needed somebody to weigh silver, measure grain, keep records and settle disputes. And in fact, my own surname, Waitman, goes back to the roots of this, as somebody who would weigh the sacks of coal before they went out to make sure they were correct. And that person would also keep the records and settle disputes. Trust could no longer be a personal thing. It had to become institutional. And that meant control. So our story goes back really 5,000 years to a place called Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq. And in the city of Summer, the most powerful buildings weren't palaces, they were temples. And these temples weren't just religious centres either, they were economic engines. People brought grain, livestock, silver, and not just to trade, but also to store. Temples became vaults. And the priests, well, they became the accountants, record keepers, administrators, and lenders on occasion. Yes, even lenders. And on clay tablets, they recorded who deposited what, who owed what, and who borrowed what, and when it was due. These clay tablets are some of the earliest balance sheets in history. But this is where the first key idea of modern money comes in. Money in this environment didn't start as coins. It started as records. Entries on a clay tablet, obligations, debt. And that debt came long before we had cash. So the roots of modern finance aren't in trade. They're in administration. And the temple system worked right up until rulers noticed something. And kings and rulers realized very quickly that money could fund armies, pay soldiers, build roads, collect taxes, and enforce loyalty. And so the power shifted. Away from the priests and the temples, and into the palaces. And this is where we see the rise of state money. Coins stamped with a ruler's face. Symbols of authority pressed into metal. Not just value, but sovereignty. And if the king declared a coin as legal tender, then it was. You just had to accept it. And if the king demanded his taxes, then you had to pay. It was his money. Money quickly left the people and became political. And here's one of the most important concepts in the entire history of money. It's that people didn't use this state-sponsored money because they wanted to. They used it because they had to, because their taxes were demanded in it. And the process was simple and incredibly powerful. The state issued the money. The state then demanded its taxes in that money. And voila, demand is instantly created. And even if you didn't trust the money, you had no choice but use it because the tax collector was coming. And this is how monetary concepts spread. Not through choice, but through obligation. It's a quiet system, but it's a very effective one. But early rulers also noticed another problem. Debt. As financial systems expanded, so did obligations. Farmers fell behind. Families lost land. And debts became unpayable. And because of this, societies became unstable. It was often followed by revolts and violence. So a whole new concept was born, debt forgiveness. Back in Mesopotamia, rulers would often declare Jubilees. These were celebrations where debts were wiped clean, slates were reset. And it wasn't done out of kindness. It was because there was too much debt floating around and it threatened the system itself. The rulers of the time understood something deeply practical. Any financial system that destroys its people will eventually destroy itself. So let's pull all this together. Money's not neutral. It never has been. From the moment the temples and later the kings took control, money became political, value became enforceable, and trust became institutional, and behaviour could be shaped. Whoever controlled the money controlled the power, which in turn controlled the people's behaviour, what people work for, what they value, and what they fear losing. Money doesn't measure society, it organises it. But here's the twist. For thousands of years, kings and states controlled money. Until something unexpected happened. Private individuals started storing gold, issuing receipts, making promises. And not to some priest in a temple either, to each other. And those promises began to circulate as money. So next time we're going to talk about this, we're going to look at if kings controlled the money, what happened when private banks emerged? The goldsmiths, the paper promises, and the quiet beginnings of modern banking. But that's episode 4. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The History of Money. And don't forget to give us a follow for the next episode of The History of Money from Barter to Bitcoin.